She walked out the front door, told her mother she'd be back, and was never seen again. Her uncle was found dead 2 days later with her gun. 11 family members were arrested for unspeakable crimes. This is the disappearance of Brittney Wood. If you know anything about Brittney Wood, contact the Mobile Police Department. A FET $700 reward is available for information. Her daughter deserves answers. Share this video. Someone watching might know something. Subscribe for new cases and comment below. What do you think happened to Brittney Wood? Brittney Nicole Wood was born on September 25, 1992, in Mobile, Alabama, to Wallace Hankey and Chessie Wood. She was the oldest of Chessie's children, and from the very beginning, that position meant something to her. She was the first, the one her mother watched most closely, the one who in many ways set the tone for the family that followed. Those who knew Brittney describe her in consistent terms: loving, spirited, and deeply devoted to the people she cared about. She was not a person who held back affection. She gave it openly and often, particularly when it came to children. Her cousin Corbin, along with others close to her, has spoken about how naturally Brittney connected with kids, how she lit up around them, how being a mother was not something that happened to her but something she embraced completely. In 2010, at just 17 years old, Brittney gave birth to her daughter. She was young, yes, but by every account she was present, she was loving, and she was devoted. Her father, Wally Hankey, and stepmother, Stephanie Hankey, remained consistent presences in Brittney's life. They often helped care for her daughter and remained close to Brittney throughout her young adulthood. Chessie, her mother, shared a particularly strong bond with her as her eldest child, a bond that Chessie has never stopped honoring, even in the years since Brittney's disappearance. As a teenager, Brittney was something of a free spirit. She moved between the homes of various relatives within her large extended family, navigating circumstances that were at times difficult. There were real hardships, economic, familial, personal, but there were also bright spots. There was love given and love received. There were people in her corner who believed in her. Today, the community of family members and friends who advocate for Brittney remains active, and at the center of it all is her daughter, who turned 12 years old in 2022, and who still, quietly and deeply, misses her mother. Brittney Wood was approximately 9 years old when the abuse began. The person responsible was Ronald Robertson, a 53-year-old man who was at the time in a relationship with Brittney's maternal grandmother. He was a familiar presence in her life, someone who existed within the boundaries of family, within the spaces that are supposed to feel safe. For 2 years, the abuse continued. For 2 years, Brittney carried it. Then, at 11 years old, she did something that many adults in similar situations have found themselves unable to do. She told someone. Brittney approached the daycare director at her church and disclosed what Ronald Robertson had been doing to her. She explained the situation as clearly and completely as an 11-year-old child could, describing abuse that had been ongoing for 2 full years. The daycare director contacted police immediately. Investigators took Brittney's account seriously, pursued the evidence, and arrested Robertson. The case went to trial. Brittney testified, recounting the details of what she had endured in front of a courtroom. It was an act of courage that went far beyond what should ever be asked of a child. Robertson denied the allegations throughout, but the evidence in Brittney's testimony proved decisive. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. He attempted to appeal his conviction without success, and despite becoming eligible for parole in 2020, he remained incarcerated. The legal outcome, however, did not erase what had been done. Brittney continued to suffer the lasting psychological effects of the abuse long after Robertson was removed from her life. Persistent nightmares followed her. The trauma did not simply end because the trial did. Mobile County Assistant District Attorney Nikki Patterson noted that Brittney's subsequent struggle with substance use disorder was consistent with what is commonly seen in survivors of prolonged childhood sexual abuse. The abuse had consequences that extended far beyond the years in which it occurred. In hindsight, Chessie would later reflect that Brittney, given the full picture of the environment in which she was raised, would have been safer in a crack house. It was a striking and painful admission, one that pointed toward a broader darkness within the family that had not yet, at that point, been fully exposed. The trauma Robertson inflicted on Brittney was the first layer. It would not be the last. It was a hot, humid evening in Tillman's Corner near Mobile, Alabama. The kind of evening that is entirely ordinary in the Deep South at the end of May. Heavy air, fading light, the slow close of another day. Between 7 and 7:30 p.m. on May 30, 2012, Brittney Wood walked out the front door of her mother's home on Leonardo Drive. She was carrying a pink or teal tote bag. Inside it, extra clothing, a red curling iron, a makeup bag, and her cell phone. Chessie Wood stood in the front yard and watched her daughter go. Brittney crossed the yard, reached the street, and walked until she disappeared from view. Chessie did not know, in that moment, that she was watching her daughter for the last time. In her earliest accounts of that evening, Chessie described Brittney as being in a good mood, calm, seemingly fine. However, when she later spoke on camera for the Peacock docuseries Monster in the Shadows, her recollection had shifted. She remembered Brittney as frustrated, aggravated even. When Chessie tried to engage her, Brittney told her she wouldn't understand and said she would be back later. It was not a warm goodbye. It was the kind of exit that, in retrospect, carries weight. Brittney had told her family she was going to visit a friend. That was not where she went. The family would later learn that her uncle, Donnie Holland, had picked her up at the end of Leonardo Drive. Together, they traveled approximately 1 hour south to a home near the Styx River in Robertsdale, in Baldwin County, where Holland was staying at the time. Cell phone records confirmed that Brittney remained in contact with friends throughout the evening, sending texts and making calls. But those communications stopped around 11:30 p.m. 6 minutes later, at 11:36 p.m., all incoming calls to her phone began going directly to voicemail. Her phone registered one final location ping at 1:07 a.m., placing her in Grand Bay, back in Mobile County, and considerably closer to home than the Styx River area where she and Holland had been. After that ping, there was nothing. Brittney Wood was never seen or heard from again. On June 1, 2012, 2 days after Brittney Wood was last seen walking down Leonardo Drive, Donnie Holland was found unconscious inside his SUV. The vehicle was parked in a secluded wooded area near his home. Holland had suffered a gunshot wound near the back of his head. He was airlifted to a hospital in Pensacola, Florida, but he never regained consciousness. He died from his injuries shortly after. His death was officially ruled a suicide. That ruling, however, did not sit easily with many people, including Chessie Wood. The location of the gunshot wound, near the back of the head, struck family members and outside observers alike as inconsistent with a self-inflicted injury. Questions were raised and never fully resolved. The official determination stood, but the skepticism surrounding it has never disappeared. 2 details discovered at the scene added significant weight to those concerns. The gun believed to have been used in the shooting did not belong to Donnie Holland. It belonged to Brittney. A friend had confirmed that Brittney obtained the weapon shortly before she vanished, specifically, according to that friend, for protection. The second detail was equally troubling. Brittney's cell phone battery was found inside Holland's vehicle. No explanation for its presence there has ever been made public. The timing of Holland's discovery compounded the unease surrounding his death. He was found approximately 30 minutes before he was scheduled to meet with former Baldwin County investigator Eric Winberg to discuss the ongoing sex abuse investigation. Whether that meeting would have produced significant information will never be known. When news of Holland's death began to spread, family members immediately tried to reach Brittney. They could not. They then contacted the friend Brittney had originally said she planned to visit. That friend confirmed Brittney had never arrived. The realization settled quickly and heavily. On June 2, 2012, the family filed a formal missing persons report. What had begun as uncertainty, a young woman who had not yet come home, shifted in the span of hours into something far more serious. Donnie Holland was dead, Brittney was unreachable, and the two facts, separated by just 2 days, were impossible to consider independently of one another. The investigation that would ultimately reshape the entire context of Brittney Wood's disappearance had only been underway for approximately 2 weeks when she vanished. It began not with a tip from an outsider, but from within the family itself. Brittney's uncle, Randall Wood, came forward and provided information to authorities, a decision widely understood to have been motivated by a desire to negotiate more favorable terms regarding his own pending charges. Whatever his reasons, the information he provided was significant. It was immediately relayed to the Sex Crimes Division and to Child Protective Services, and from there the investigation expanded rapidly and in multiple directions. What investigators uncovered was a large-scale, long-running child sex ring operating within the Wood family network. The crimes involved child molestation, the prostitution of minors, and the production of child pornography. It was not a recent development. The operation had roots that extended back through years, possibly generations, of abuse within the family circle. By the end of July 2012, 11 Wood family members and close family friends had been arrested and charged. The sentences handed down reflected the severity of what had occurred. Brittney's aunt Wendy Holland received 219 years in prison. Her aunt Mindy Kent was sentenced to 40 years. Uncle Dustin Kent received 17 years. Uncle Randall Wood, whose information had initiated the broader investigation, was sentenced to 15 years. Family friend William Brownlee received 20 years. Brittney's mother, Chessie Wood, was arrested and charged with sodomy and sexual abuse of a child under 12, though she ultimately pleaded to the misdemeanor offense of reckless endangerment. Additional family members and associates were charged and convicted in connection with the ring. Brittney herself had been among the victims of this network. At the time of her disappearance, authorities had been actively planning to interview her, as a potential witness. In the days just before she vanished, Brittney had exchanged Facebook messages with another abuse victim within their circle. Investigators believe she may have been preparing to go public with what she knew. Information that would have been damaging to multiple people still operating within that network. Baldwin County Assistant District Attorney Teresa Hines addressed the failures that allowed the abuse to continue for as long as it did. She noted that many of those ultimately convicted had prior allegations against them that were never fully pursued. The consequences of that inaction, she suggested, extended directly to Brittney. In her words, had earlier intervention occurred, Brittney might still be alive. Among everyone who knew Brittney Wood, family members, friends, and investigators alike, there is a near universal consensus on one point. She did not leave voluntarily. The people closest to her are unequivocal on this. Brittney would not have walked away from her daughter, not under any circumstances, and particularly not knowing the environment her daughter would have been left behind within a family network that Brittney understood, perhaps better than anyone, to be dangerous. That belief forms the foundation upon which every theory about her fate is built. Prosecutors have pointed to a clear and direct motive for her disappearance. Brittney was preparing to speak to police. She had information about the sex ring, first-hand knowledge, and accounts gathered from other victims within the family circle. To those whose freedom depended on that information never reaching law enforcement, she represented a serious and immediate threat. The prevailing belief among investigators is that she was silenced before she could talk. Within the family, the suspicion has long been directed at Donnie Holland and his wife, Wendy Holland. Chessie Wood has stated publicly and repeatedly, over many years, that she believes her sister Wendy and brother-in-law Donnie were responsible for her daughter's death. Some family members believe Donnie confronted Brittney and killed her before dying himself, whether by his own hand or someone else's. The evidence recovered from Holland's vehicle, Brittney's gun and her cell phone battery, has never been adequately explained, and for many, those two items speak directly to his involvement. Wendy Holland's silence has added to that suspicion. She was offered a reduced sentence in exchange for information about Brittney's whereabouts. She declined. She has refused to speak about Brittney's disappearance. That refusal, in the eyes of Chessie and others, is not the behavior of someone with nothing to hide. Law enforcement has maintained that the sex abuse investigation and the missing persons investigation are officially separate matters, while also acknowledging they could be indirectly connected. Neither the Mobile Police Department nor the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office participated in the Peacock docuseries Monster in the Shadows. Former Baldwin County Sheriff's Office Detective Eric Winberg gave an independent interview for the documentary, acting outside of any official departmental response. His participation remains the only on-camera law enforcement account associated with the case. In the years following Brittney Wood's disappearance, investigators received multiple tips and conducted multiple searches. None of them brought her home. In 2014, Mobile Police Department processed evidence from a vehicle that had been identified as potentially connected to the case. The effort produced nothing actionable. In July 2020, a tip generated by an age progression image of Brittney led investigators to a residence in Grand Bay, Alabama. Cadaver dogs were brought in and picked up a scent. A site was excavated. Once again, no significant findings emerged. Brittney's case remains open today, managed by the Mobile Police Department. Authorities strongly suspect she is no longer alive. She remains, however, officially listed in missing persons databases. To date, neither her body, her cell phone, nor any of the items she carried with her on the evening of May 30, 2012, have ever been recovered. In the fall of 2021, Peacock released Monster in the Shadows, a docuseries featuring Chessie Wood and other family members detailing the circumstances of Brittney's disappearance and the years of investigation that followed. It was an effort to generate new attention and with it new leads. Chessie, alongside Wally Honky and Stephanie Honky, continues to advocate publicly for answers. By early 2022, Chessie had begun making arrangements for Brittney's funeral, a quiet and painful acknowledgement of what she believes to be true. Brittney's daughter continues to grow up without her mother. At 8 years old, she told a news camera simply, "I miss her." That sentiment has not faded with time. His $700 reward remains available for any information leading to Brittney's location. And the people who loved her have not stopped asking questions, not stopped speaking her name, and not stopped looking. Stephanie Hankey has perhaps said it most plainly. "I want to make sure Brittney's name will always be known. If nothing else, I don't want anyone to forget the name Brittney Wood." When Donnie Holland was found unconscious in his SUV on June 1st, 2012, investigators recovered 2 items inside that vehicle that had no straightforward explanation. The first was a handgun, one that did not belong to Holland, but to Brittney Wood. It is believed to be the weapon involved in Holland's shooting. The second item was Brittney's cell phone battery. Both objects were in Holland's possession. Neither has ever been fully accounted for by investigators on the record, and both remain central to the unanswered questions surrounding Brittney's fate. The gun is particularly significant in what it implies. A friend confirmed that Brittney had acquired the weapon shortly before she disappeared, and that she obtained it specifically for protection. That detail raises an immediate and unresolved question. Protection from whom? The answer, if one exists, has never been made public. What is known is that the gun ended up in her uncle's vehicle, and that Brittney has not been seen since the night she was last in his company. The cell phone records offer the most detailed timeline available of Brittney's final hours. Throughout the evening of May 30, she remained in regular contact with friends, sending text messages and making phone calls. That activity stopped around 11:30 p.m. 6 minutes later, at 11:36 p.m., all incoming calls began routing directly to voicemail. That pattern is consistent with one of two possibilities. The phone was powered down entirely, or the battery was physically removed. Given that the battery was later found in Holland's vehicle, the second possibility carries considerable weight. The phone's final recorded ping placed Brittney in Grand Bay at 1:47 a.m., a location meaningfully closer to her home on Leonardo Drive than to the Styx River area where she and Holland had spent the evening. Without the battery, the phone could not transmit further location data. The trail stopped there. In 2014, the Mobile Police Department processed forensic evidence from a vehicle discovered months earlier and believed to be connected to the case. No actionable findings resulted from that effort. The physical evidence surrounding Brittney's disappearance remains exactly that. Evidence of something, but not yet proof of anything. It is a picture that is suggestive, that points in clear directions, but that has not, as of yet, delivered the definitive answers her family continues to seek. In the summer of 2012, two investigations were running simultaneously in the Mobile Bay area. One involved the arrest, prosecution, and sentencing of 11 individuals connected to a large-scale child sex ring. The other involved finding a missing 19-year-old woman who had last been seen in the evening of May 30. Both investigations were serious, both demanded resources, attention, and time, but they did not receive equal weight. And the consequences of that imbalance have followed Brittney's case ever since. When arrests are being made, trials are being scheduled, and children are being removed from dangerous situations, the momentum of a criminal prosecution is difficult to interrupt or redirect. The sex ring investigation was urgent, visible, and produced measurable outcomes. Brittney's disappearance, by contrast, generated questions that could not be quickly answered and a search that yielded nothing concrete. In the competition for finite investigative resources and public attention, her case lost ground, steadily and many believe consequentially. Most of Brittney's family members hold a consistent view at this point. They believe the criminal investigation took clear priority over the search for their daughter, and that this prioritization had lasting consequences for the missing persons case. Wally Honke stated as much directly to Fox 10. It's more than just a missing person. Something's went wrong somewhere, and I think they just need to take it more serious. That frustration, expressed nearly a decade after Brittney vanished, reflected a wound that had never healed. The 2021 Peacock docuseries Monster in the Shadows was, in part, an effort to correct that imbalance, to place Brittney at the center of a narrative that had too often positioned her as a secondary figure within a larger story. The family participated precisely because they felt that separation between the two investigations had never been adequately made in real time. There is also an uncomfortable dimension to the public response. The revelations about the Wood family made broad community advocacy difficult to sustain. Sympathy in cases like this is rarely unconditional, and the circumstances surrounding Brittney's family complicated the kind of sustained public support that missing persons cases often depend upon. What remains is a documented failure, not of any single decision, but of a system in which a young woman who was simultaneously a victim and a potential witness fell between the cracks of two investigations, and a decade later, no one has been held accountable for her disappearance. Since the day the missing persons report was filed, Chessie Wood has not been quiet. She has given interviews to local news outlets, spoken on camera, maintained public pressure on investigators, and participated in the Peacock docuseries Monster in the Shadows, all in service of the goal she has stated plainly and repeatedly. My goal has always been to find Brittney Wood. Prior to the documentary's release, Chessie told Fox 10 that she had made Brittney a promise, that she would never give up. The docuseries, she explained, was an act of faith in that promise, a calculated hope that wider attention might produce what a decade of local efforts had not. Wally Honke and Stephanie Honke have stood beside that effort without wavering. Nearly 1 year after Brittney vanished, Wally spoke publicly to Fox 10, and his grief was specific in the way that only a parent's grief can be. He did not speak in abstractions. He spoke about what he could no longer see. I miss seeing her and her daughter together, he said. I I miss seeing them smile together and love on each other. It was the loss of a relationship between a mother and her child that he carried alongside his own. Stephanie Honke has transformed that same grief into sustained advocacy. Her words have become a rallying point for everyone who has followed Brittney's case. I want to make sure Brittney's name will always be known. If nothing else, I don't want anyone to forget the name Brittney Wood. Brittney's cousin Corbin, along with numerous other family members and friends, continues to assist in search efforts and awareness campaigns, ensuring that the case does not fade quietly from public consciousness. At the center of all of it is Brittney's daughter. She was 8 years old when she looked into a news camera and said she wished she could give her mother a hug. She is now approaching her teenage years, growing up with an absence that has never been explained and a question that has never been answered. Her family insists, and rightly so, that she deserves to know what happened to her mother. Brittney's case remains open. A $700 reward stands for any information leading to her location, and the people who love her have not stopped looking.